Welcome to the Compiled Podcast, a show where two programmers talk about anything and everything. My name's Nick. I am the host of this podcast with my good friend Jasper.
Hello.
In each episode, we will have a topic, and the goal of the episode is to compile the topic down to a list of essential points for our listeners. And we haven't seen each other for a while, and I mean, we're not seeing each other like physically now, but
How you doing, man? I am currently abroad and away. I've run away from the UK in an attempt to get a garden for myself, which is better than not having a garden.
Yeah, because your accommodation in London isn't really fit for long-term like imprisonment.
Oh no, imprisonment is one way to put it. That would be a proper prison. Yeah. No, I've just moved back to my parents' place to have a bit more space for ourselves. So yeah.
How's it going there? Is it, do people feel worried or?
Yeah, it seems like they've taken a more sensible approach than the UK. But I try to not look at the news because it's a bit concerning and it just stresses me out. So yeah, I'm just pretending it doesn't exist.
And is uni on hold now?
Oh yes, it is. Well, no, it isn't. I mean, everything is online. So technically it isn't, but essentially nobody's doing anything. So yeah, that's a bit of a weird one, I think.
Yeah.
I guess it's similar to work, where like a lot of people will probably be working, but everything has kind of died down. I don't know how it is for you.
Yeah, it depends. So I think over the past, the week before it was really busy because that was the end of quarter and we had a lot of things to finish up. But then this week it was sort of in the transition between two quarters where we have to do a lot of planning, a lot of sort of reflection. So yeah, it hasn't been as crazy as before, but I think it's gonna pick right up like tomorrow. So
yeah, exciting.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So this week we are talking about something. So the topic is actually chosen by you this time, and.
Ooh. Look at me contributing.
Cool. The topic is learning a new programming language during the quarantine or without it. I think. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you want to talk about this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still in uni, so obviously it's something that's constantly somewhat on my mind. My girlfriend is currently in the process of learning computery things. So she's slowly going to get into learning, C++ and Python. So that's been on my mind. And then, I've always been tutoring and stuff. So it's something that keeps coming up. So I think, it's an interesting one and I think it's really enjoyable. And it might be a bit more accessible for people that are not traditionally already in this field or as deeply into this field as we might be.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely felt the same as well because Caprice is also learning Python at the moment for her new job, and I think from a lot of friends that I've talked to, because of the quarantine, suddenly you have a little bit more free time and to do hobbies, and one of the cool things you can do with computer science is pick up a new language or pick up some new technologies, but language is the one that most people go for at first because it's it's very defined and it's clear and
frameworks are a bit more specific.
Definitely
you get into those at some point, but essentially it comes down to the same kind of feel anyway. Same process, same reasons for going for them. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that the inspiration of the topic is because your girlfriend is currently learning Python and learning C++, but as someone with not much IT knowledge beforehand, versus if we were to learn something, we would have known like how programming model works already, and that would be a different story, right?
Yeah. So definitely, it's definitely different for everybody, but I feel like the process still kind of comes down to the same thing, even though some of the steps might be accelerated. I feel like everybody goes through the same flow of, obviously we won't have to learn things about memory or anything, but we still have to learn the fundamentals of the language before being able to do anything else with it. And it's it's something everybody can get into. which I think is fun. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just to sort of give a bit more perspective from my side. Personally, I have started learning. I've started coding from a very young age. I started coding when I was 10 years old, and learning language for me it was definitely like something that I've done many times, even um, throughout my teenage years. And it just became a second nature to me. But however, I did find out when I started university, when I met you and a few other people um, who maybe only started coding in uni. This was a little bit difficult to start at first, and just because you don't have that mental model in mind. And also, for some reason, in Edinburgh, they teach you Haskell as your first language.
It's still my first love, let's face
Yeah.
it. Yeah, no, it is a bit different because that was essentially my first language.
Mm-hmm.
I touched PHP and stuff before, but honestly, those don't fall into the category of traditional programming languages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was my first language, and I feel like learning to learn a language is a process on its own,
Mm.
and it's been an ongoing process
Yeah.
uh, ever since. I'm still looking for better ways of doing it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. We are not going to get into too much specifics on how to learn a new language straight away. But before that, I want to sort of just cover a little bit about why is this something that people want to do, right? For us, for us in the IT in the sort of programming field already, industry wise, learning language is sort of mastering a different kind of tool, and with this, you essentially have a little bit more you have a bit more
Flexibility.
diverse tool
Yeah.
set under your belt, and you can do like different things, right?
Yeah, I feel like every language can sort of pull off the same things for a lot of the languages, but then some of them are just better suited for the job. And
Yeah.
then it's always a trade-off between, am I going to put in the time to learn this new language to do this task a tad better than I would have been able to do it with the old language or not?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely like it's just a different tool set, which
Yeah,
is
I would say it's sort of tailored. So some languages are tailored for like a group of purposes, right? So for example, in for Python, it's very good for data processing, and it's very easy. I find it even more useful to use Python for simple scripting than Bash
yeah,
scripts, because it's not Bash script is not the easiest language to understand and or even
yeah,
write, and Python is very much just close to English in that regard.
yeah.
And if you have I literally did this recently where one of my schema files needs some formatting, but it's like not a custom one that's provided by the IDE. However, I know how they should look like, from a conceptual point of view, and then I just wrote a little script that splits it, and then formats in a way that's nice, and then they just print it out to a different file, and that will save a lot of time than me trying to go through it by hand, or.
Yeah, exactly. Or like try doing that in Java or
Yeah,
C plus
exactly.
plus would be an absolute nightmare. So
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, no, it's definitely like they would be able to do it, but knowing that extra tool is such a useful thing. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other part of that is for people that don't already know languages. So my girlfriend is. She was actually talking to a PhD supervisor, and he went, the second she's a civil engineer, the second you learn to use a computer on top of your engineering degree, you are suddenly worth twice as much to an employer as you were previously. Well,
Mm.
learning, a basic Python course is honestly not that complex. So, in terms of, there's a very strong case to be made in terms of employability. Learn a programming language, you'll suddenly sound so fancy.
Yeah. And
It
I think
really,
it's just because of how embedded software is, right? The nature of software is literally embedded into sort of every aspect of life, and
yeah,
into every industry. And this happened for Caprice as well, where she comes from a media major, so she does a lot of I don't want to upset her, but she does a lot of thinking and a lot of things to do with words, let's say.
yeah.
that being said, since she started learning Python and since she found out about Google Analytics, she's been doing a lot of uh, researching and a little bit of playing with how the tool looks like and um, what sort of insight you can gather from that to validate some of your theories. And this turned out to be super nice. So she was able to help out with the podcast, and she got a job on this field. So
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it for like everybody. It's not this is not something that is just constrained to people already in the field. Like definitely anyone can pick it up. These days there's so many resources out there. There's very little reason not to pick up a programming language, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I think it's especially useful in that regard. So if you have not known any language, or you if you have been using one particular or like a few particular languages all the time for a long period, like me, for example. So my daily language is mostly just straight up Java and maybe some front end Dart, just if I'm doing front end. But what's interesting is, throughout my employment, throughout my time with Google, there's always some projects that requires me to uh, essentially not be too comfortable in that regard, because I've done projects with mostly C++. I've done project with mostly Python, and those are opportunities for me to literally learn it. It's literally for me to relearn it, to be honest, because I never learned it properly in the first
Yeah.
time. And yeah, it's the matter of getting you out of your comfort zone and learning sort of how other so the model is not necessarily the same between languages.
Yeah.
And finding out the intricacies and how you can use those to your advantage is super nice, and it gives you a bit more appreciation for people who develop these languages, right?
Yeah, I think it's also the ability to, all of these different tools are out there, and it's the ability to kind of grasp and understand their capabilities, and then if you ever need to like do something really strange, you'll be like, oh wait, but I remember that this one programming language could do this thing that
Mm-hmm.
happens to be specifically very well suited for this purpose. So yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. uh just out of curiosity, can you recall the last time you had learned a language and what was the experience like?
I mean, so I'm actually working on C++ right now. Um,
Oh.
I forget, is it C++ or C sharp? Like this is my problem. They're all so similar. No, it's whatever Unity is written in. It's
It's
been
C sharp. It's C sharp, by the way.
yeah, okay. So C sharp. I've not been doing that much because of the whole coronavirus thing, um, but essentially I'm working on that right now, and it's very exciting because it's very similar to everything else I've known, but then it has these small intricacies that are different. I actually
Yeah.
quite like it. I really enjoy it. It's very nice learning a new language, to be honest.
Yeah, the use case is very different, right? So for C
Yeah,
sharp and Unity is mostly for graphic stuff like games
yeah,
and whatnot, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, I'm having a good time learning something new.
Yeah. Has it been? Do you feel that Does it feel like a little bit frustrating, or do you feel like, oh, this is just something natural, and if you get stuck somewhere, it's normal, and what was that feel like?
I'm definitely I'm feeling I'm finally getting the benefits of having learned a bunch of languages throughout the years. This is the first language where I feel like that learning process has really kicked into another gear. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm racing through it. Whereas previous languages, it's always been something fairly new. So if you go from Java to C, and then from C to Python, those are fundamentally they're all programming languages, but they have very different ways of working. And I've now kind of reached the breaking point where most of the things I'm going to be learning are probably similar to what I already know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's actually a really satisfying process for me now.
That's nice. That's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, 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 it's a good time.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do bash scripts properly, because because of my day to day work, there's actually a decent amount of time that I have to spend on the terminal, and I felt it was nice. It would be nice learn some of these bash scripts commands properly and use them, you know,
Yeah,
to help with productivity, right?
and
Because
I would say that bash scripts are probably the single most satisfying thing you're ever going to write, because it's super hacky, but if you get it to work, it's super satisfying.
I know, but I think the point was learning something like this with a little bit lower level language um is harder and is a bit more frustrating, and I think that would serve as a pointer that if you have not had any previous programming experience, maybe it's nicer to pick up a higher
Yeah,
order language, which means it's basically it's closer to English
yeah.
as possible. And if you're literally going lower level to like C or even to what was the word, assembly, those are very low level and it deals with
A lot of the stuff you don't want to deal with. Yeah,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's so for us because for myself because I mostly been using high level language from from my day job and for some various stuff that I do on the side. I thought it was nice to get into something a little bit deeper and a little bit more fiddly. And let me tell you, it is fiddly there.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Um, cool. So I want to let's get into a little bit more on like a detail, on or not detail, but like more on the practical side of things. Um, I think you have a very strong sentiment on how exactly to start learning, right? I mean,
yeah,
we only
yeah,
talked about this like what 20 minutes ago, just before recording, but
yeah.
what
No,
else tell us
I have
about
very
that?
strong opinions on this, because I think people, and this is one of my frustrations with university, where you sit through endless lectures where they just show you slides of data types and algorithms and this and that, and I'm of the opinion that doing stuff is by far the best way to learn. So no matter how stupid the project is, do a project and use that as a basis of learning. I keep recommending my girlfriend to, find an algorithm. For those who know about this kind of stuff, implement quicksort in the language you're trying to learn. Just something, super simple, but set yourself a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna slowly involve more things to do, and it also means that there's an end goal and kind of a purpose to what you're doing, as opposed to just printing endless things. All of these A lot of these courses kind of run you through really random things where it doesn't add up to one big thing. Um, and yeah, I think projects are definitely the way to go. Do something with
Yeah.
what you're learning.
I wonder, just to play the devil's advocate here. I wonder, does that mean, uh, will people get too frustrated because they don't have that mental model of how the language should work before jumping into the project, and they will feel a little bit lost? Because, to be honest, this is what happened for Caprice. So she
Yeah.
started learning Python. She started doing like, because I literally just straight up sent her to Code Academy for tutorials, and she was doing those. Then she went, "Oh, okay, it's nice. I can do it on on the website, but what if I want to do it offline on the laptop?" And then she found out, oh, I actually can't just write something like in Python. I can just write the Python stuff and then it will get run. There's a process of how that works, and then the process of how to set that up. She needs to install the binary and blah blah blah. And those I think that part to her was a little bit more frustrating than actually learning the language in the first bit. So I think it depends. I think it's up to per person, for sure. But I think there's merit in starting with the project or starting with a little bit more theoretical bits. Uh, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
what. Yeah.
it's always going to be a mixture. You can't do a project until you've learned something.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're, yeah, I mean, I'm always going to stick to saying projects are the best way to learn. But as long as you set a reasonable target to yourself, the
Yeah.
second you start learning Python, don't be like, oh, I'm going to write a new Google, because you're not going to. But that's why I'm saying, find a simple algorithm. Quicksort will be doable for anyone starting to learn Python,
Yeah.
because it's just a bunch of for loops. And so yeah, that's probably a bit hard if you're just starting out. That's true. So I'm
Yeah,
yeah
I would say, it will be it is useful to read about things and to understand how the language works, but I would do it to the minimum amount. So what I mean is, if I, for example, if I'm, let's just give an example here. If I'm learning um Java, for example. If I'm learning Java, what I need to do is I will read something about how Java works and how JVM and everything else works. But just there, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm not gonna go into detail about like how memory is, how the RAM gets incorporated, and how does garbage collection works, that sort of stuff. I wouldn't go into too much of those details. All I need to know is I write something, and it gets used like this, and
yeah
how what happens in between and what I need to do on my side. And I think at that point I am confident enough to know I have the broad picture, right? Then I can go into details about not so much details. Then I can really just go into it and be like, let's do this. Let's, as you
yeah
said, let's set a
exactly.
goal. Let's do this. However, feel free to like consult documentations on or examples if you need, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's also one of the key things. Like I think for every programmer, the most important skill is being able to Google things, and that sounds a bit like a stupid,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a cliche at this point, but it's true. I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody is constantly Googling things,
Yeah.
so that's something you have to, the sooner you get into that process, the better it is. So don't dive in without any knowledge at all, and then think you can Google your way through. You've got to set a basis, but then also accept the fact that you're going to be doing a lot of, you know, very simple troubleshooting, which is probably the most satisfying troubleshooting you're going to do, because every problem you're going to Google will instantly have an answer to it.
Yeah.
So it's really satisfying. I guess that also. Um, because I think you are more inclined to reading a proper book or a proper resource on things. Um,
Yeah, I would say I stick to the I do like reading stuff, just so I am not going in like completely uh blank. But I think I've moved on from the thread that I need to read the whole doc before I start doing stuff. That has been my undoing for many times, and through like throughout university and even throughout work. And I've learned that it's enough. It's important to read to the point that you get the big picture, and that's it.
yeah,
Then you can
yeah,
move on and to the problem at hand. And if you do need to go down to the specifics, you can do that. But it's a bit pointless and even impossible sometimes to do it as a in a bottom up approach, where you're
yeah,
gonna say I'm gonna learn every single theoretical detail and then build my knowledge back from the ground up. That doesn't work. Um, I mean, not for me at least.
I feel like there's something to be said for that, because if you look at, I feel like everybody these days is learning through online tutorials.
Mm-hmm.
There's online, Code Academy or Data Camp. I think those are great, but I feel like they often fail to give a solid foundation. They just kind of go, this is a list, this is a Y,
Yeah.
this is an X. Whereas, like, I do think there's a lot to be said for just an old school book, or just the languages docs,
Uh huh.
and just a bit of dry reading is good.
Yeah, this is something I found really useful a little bit later into my career, where it's definitely nice to do these projects and these tutorials, but it is also super useful to do. Before you do that, you actually read the docs for the language, because most languages will have like a you know tour of the language page, where you
Yeah,
just like, it's like a one page. It doesn't take you more than 15 minutes to read through it. And
yeah,
but it just explains how the language works, what sort of model it use, and how does it work with low level binaries, and basically how does it get used by the computer. And
Yeah.
once you have that in mind, then it's a bit. Actually, I feel like the most language tutorials do link to the official page. It's just no one that actually opens it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, yeah, and I guess one of the good points about the official docs is that you can kind of go at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you know a bunch of things, then you can just kind of skim through it. Whereas with the online tutorials, if you know a bunch of stuff, in the first 10 lessons or whatever you call them, you're just going to be sitting there going, yeah, I know all of this. Can I please just go on?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, yeah, yeah, but it's always a bit of a combination of both.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I would say one of the things I've learned throughout my time of programming is really to learn something, no matter it's a language or it's a framework or whatever, it's important to set a game plan before,
Yeah.
before you start. And for me, if I'm learning a language, the time goes, like, this is purely personal, by the way. I'm starting with an official documentation about. So usually in every language that I've learned, there's two pages I read all the time: get started and towards the language. These are the two pages that I always read. Because the get started page will tell you how to install stuff, how to set up everything, and then it probably has an example that you can just. It's like a quick hello world. Most likely, it's a hello world,
Yeah.
and then the language tour goes a little bit more into details about how the language works, what's the mechanics, and what are the intricacies. Because you gotta look out for what type system it is, and because those stuff will impact you for in the long run. But this might be optional for if you are just starting with the language, but definitely the get started page is a must read for me.
Right.
Then I move on to tutorial projects, whether it's pre set up tutorials. I also found GitHub to be a really good resource of tutorial series, because people will actually do tutorials, and then you can check out different branches of different checkpoints, and then it all has readme on like how to do stuff, and you can just follow that and then compare yourself against like different branches. You can just open up a PR and then just literally go through. This is the correct way of doing it. This is the way I'm doing it, and
Yeah.
then like what's the differences?
Yeah. Yeah. There's that. Yeah. That game plan thing is, I think, a pretty good idea. Although it's really hard to set out that game plan for a lot of people, I reckon, me included. I'm not that good at visualizing my journey through a new language,
Mm-hmm.
in the first instance. But yeah, I do generally follow the same, basic set of rules. The getting started pages, honestly, don't they're great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm approaching this more like I'm because I have I come from a little bit of a athlete perspective on this one, where if I'm trying to learn how to like run hurdles, or I don't know how do you do like jump hurdles or whatnot. Like I wouldn't go straight on the track. I will at least like learn how, at least learn a little bit about how exactly the mechanics work and how I'm supposed to jump across it. Do I literally like hop across it or like whatever? And then I will start like doing practices and whatnot. And so I think that's why I learned it this way. But again, this is purely personal to each to everyone, and you just need to like sort of find the way that works for you, and that makes you learn. And one thing I would say though is super useful that I've learned throughout the years is write and document your learning experience. So I did this for Angular Dart when I was learning it. I wrote a whole tutorial series on my blog. You can check it out. And yeah, I'm planning to do the same for whatever language that I end up learning next. I'm gonna try to do it in a way where it's a bit more organized, and I have a daily or maybe a diary like thing where I would just record the stuff I've learned, and
yeah,
it's nice because you have something to reference back, and also if it's digitized, it's searchable.
I think yeah, this is one that you put on there, and honestly, I that's honestly so smart. I have done that for a few small projects, but I've never done it intentionally. It always just
Mm-hmm.
kind of happened in the background. But it's a very good way of learning because writing down something just helps you to learn. Two, it's actually a really good almost like a cheat sheet for yourself, where you can go back and just be like, oh shit, how did I do this? And three, it's actually it forced me um, to make sure that I'm properly aware of what I'm writing down, instead of just doing X and Y. When I'm writing it down, I can sort of conceptualize and check in my head that I'm actually doing it right. And if I'm not doing it right, I'll Google it and make sure that I'm doing it right. So it's, yeah, honestly, that's such a good shout. I've never really thought about that, but I'm gonna do that now.
Yeah, I think always had this thought. It was just in the beginning. It was just difficult to do because I was not a man of process. I thought this is bureaucracy. I don't need this, right? And what I found in the end was, maybe like 10, 12 months down the line, I want to go back to see something, and then it wasn't there. And I was like, I remember seeing this, and then there was nothing for me to check for. And, I've had this happen to me enough times now that I'm a little bit more. Uh, I know to keep notes of things basically.
Yeah, no, it's a very good shout. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say don't go too much on that though. Don't go like full like court law court recording kind of things. Don't record every single thing. Just make sure you have the stuff that's important, and annotate it well.
I think generally speaking, write something down when you had to think about it or look it up. Because those are the points. Obviously, if you're doing stuff without thinking about them, then most likely you're not gonna need them anymore. But the second you stand still and think about something, it's apparently important enough that it needs a bit more attention.
And I just thought of this like literally as we were talking. This wasn't on the outline, but I think it was nice to. It's always nice to learn something, especially a language, but with a community, right? There's always communities of people learning, and if not, you can always just get someone, to and be like, do you want to learn something together, and then you can just like check yourself. And for me, this was the case for me and Caprice because she was learning Python. I haven't used it for the better part of a while, and when she asks me questions, I don't know them, and I have to look it up myself, and I ended up learning it as well. So we started sort of doing it, both of us start getting benefits from literally her learning it. So yeah, that's quite nice.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good idea. I think in general, learning together is much more fun than your own. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go into the maintenance of this, but I think it is sort of this is what I meant by having a good set of notes, because you can always if you forget about things, and you can just refer back to your notes, and this is a way to maintain your knowledge of the language per se. Because like sometimes if you haven't, especially for me, because if I haven't used, say, I don't know, Python for a year, then I'm not gonna remember most of the syntaxes, and having a quick notes to go back to is always nice. Or you can just like Google stuff.
Your notes, and as I said, if you do it relatively neatly, you can almost use them as cheat sheets, which I'm a massive fan of cheat sheets. But writing them yourself is actually super valuable and pretty satisfying. So I agree. If you kind of keep that up, I reckon you're golden for that.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I think that's it. That's most of the tips that we got.
Yeah.
Cool. If you are learning a language right now, or you are planning to do so, in the short period coming up, do let us know, and I would like to hear about your experiences and what are the pain points, or what are the bit that is frustrating. Maybe we can do a follow-up episode to address those, because sure. It would be nice to see what problems you are facing, rather than us trying to imagine it. And but to be honest, the principal takeaway from me is, do try to plan ahead on learning something, and do keep a record of your experience, and yeah, I think it's important also to acknowledge that learning anything, especially if you haven't learned any language before, it's gonna be challenging. It's gonna be frustrating. You're gonna be stuck here scratching your head for like 2 days straight because like something won't compile. I've definitely been that guy, and
yeah. And also keep in mind that if everybody struggles with it, I still struggle with it. I'm assuming you still struggle with it.
Yeah, definitely.
It will, you'll never stop Googling. 2, things will always keep breaking, and that doesn't, that's a natural process in learning all of this and doing it. So
I think to be honest, there's just an inherent amount of worrying and frustration that comes along with learning, and I think you just have to be in peace with that, and be because I think on the other regard though, if you are getting stuck, if you're getting frustrated, a lot of the times that means you are challenging yourself. You are by getting through them, you are going to learn something, right? So there's always a little bit more to look forward to, through the other side. So
yeah, for sure.
Keep learning and keep pushing it, and
and have fun.
Yeah, and have fun. Cool. I think we ended on a super positive note.
Wow, look at us.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else like in particular you wanna say?
No, I think that's most of it. Honestly, go for it. Learn something new. It's a good time to learn something new. So go for it.
Yeah. I think so too. It's especially now because as I said, a lot of people are working at home, and then you have a little bit more time. Me personally as well. So I'm trying to learn something, both in the realm of programming and also something else. I'm trying to do better in my video editing skills in case this podcast ever becomes a video thing. So, which you won't, but
I will see.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and let us know if you have any comments, and we are happy to answer them to the best of our abilities. If you're listening on the podcast on YouTube, the audio is also available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. So reach out to us there, and yeah.
See you next week.
See you.